The world has always had rich and poor. That's just human nature.
The World Inequality Report 2026 disagrees. It states clearly, inequality is not a natural law. It is the result of political choices made over decades.
Every society has inequality. That's not a choice, that's reality.
Here is the reality. The top 10% of the world owns 75% of all wealth. The bottom 50% owns 2%.
The bottom 50%, meaning the laziest, least productive half.
Meaning 4 billion people, many of whom work longer hours than anyone reading about them from a penthouse in Davos.
But the wealthy create more value. That justifies the gap.
60,000 people, that is 0.001% of the planet, control more wealth than the entire bottom 50% combined, 3 times more.
60,000 people?
60,000. You could fit them at a single stadium. They own more than 4 billion humans.
That's extraordinary, but how does that happen?
Between 1995 and 2025, the share of global wealth held by that 0.001% grew from 4% to 6% every year without interruption, not because they worked harder every year, because the system compounds in their direction.
Compound interest, that's just math.
It is, and math doesn't care that 2.8 billion people today live on between $2 and $7 a day. The math keeps running.
Surely governments redistribute through taxes.
The top 1% controls 37% of all global wealth. They pay effective tax rates lower than those of the middle class. Rates climb steadily as income rises, then fall sharply at the very top. The graph inverts where it matters most.
How is that legal?
Because the people who write tax law receive campaign funding from the people who benefit from that tax law.
That's corruption.
That's lobbying, which is legal, which is actually the point.
But democracies can vote to change this.
The UN report identified the 3 main obstacles to fixing inequality: fragmented electorates, underrepresentation of workers, and the outsized influence of wealth in policymaking. In other words, the system that creates inequality also protects itself from the people trying to change it.
What about private investment? The wealthy create businesses and jobs.
Private wealth has grown enormously in the last 30 years. Public wealth, the hospitals, schools, infrastructure that everyone shares, has stagnated. Governments privatized assets to fund budgets, which means the wealthy now own what used to belong to everyone.
That sounds like a transfer.
The World Inequality Report calls it exactly that, a transfer of public assets into private hands, approved by elected governments.
So we voted for this.
We voted for people funded by the people who designed this. There is a difference.
Is there any number that actually captures how extreme this is?
The top 1% of the world earns more in a year than the bottom 50% earns in their entire lives. And that gap widened last year, and the year before, and the year before that.
Why doesn't this cause revolutions?
It does. The UN linked rising inequality directly to the collapse of public trust in institutions, the rise of extremism, and the spread of political instability across every continent. The anger exists. It just keeps getting redirected.
Redirected where?
Toward immigrants, toward other poor people, toward anyone except the 60,000 who own the stadium and the team and the broadcast rights. and the politicians on the field.
That's a dark way to frame it.
The World Inequality Report used different language. It called it an absence of political will, which is a polite way of saying the same thing.
So what would actually change this?
The same report calculated that a 3% additional tax on the richest 100,000 people would fully fund education in every low and middle-income country on Earth. One policy, already written, already calculated, never passed.
Why not?
Because the ones who would sign it are paid by the ones who would lose from it.